This video is a walkthrough of mock financial statements for a university and an explanation of some of the key elements that you see here. Just to orient you to this document from the top, what we see are budget to actual expenses. This means it's a comparison of actual expenses to those items that were budgeted, and it's for the period of July 1st to October 31st. At this institution, the fiscal year starts July 1st. So what we're looking at is only a few months of expenses on the current fiscal year. So we're looking at all the expenses for July, August, September, and the full month of October. So we're looking at 4 months out of the calendar year, or 25% of the budget, or 25% of the fiscal year. Across the top, we have a column for account numbers, which I've hidden. We have an account name or description. I've hidden the details on those too, so what we see are simply the major categories here along the left in the A column. So there's a category called instruction and a lot of items underneath it. There's a category called research and a lot of accounts or accounts details underneath it, and so forth and so on. So this left-hand column are the major categories that matter to the budgeting group and the finance people at this particular university. Along the top row here, these column headings, original budgeted expenses, we have a series of numbers that are the amount budgeted for this time of this year. So we have a budget that changes on a monthly basis, because you don't normally say get the entire budget at the beginning of a 12-month period. You get some of it in the first month, some of it in the second month, and some of it in the third month, for example. So here we have what shows as an original budget and then a revised budget. So in this case, let's find a piece that changed. Here in the academic support area, something changed, and the original budget for this unit at this time of year was $459,000, and the revised budget went up to $541,000. That was what was budgeted. Now under the F column, we see the actual expenses as of October 31st. If we look at the first row here, under instruction, the actual expenses were recorded as $78,000 against a budget of $346,000. That is a 23% consumption of the budget. Here we have under research, $226,000 against the budget. And so we've used 52% of the budget at this time of year, and so forth and so on. So the budget used percent is how much in actual expenses has been used against the budgeted amount. So 78,000 divided by 346,000 is 23%. Here we have a column that is a little different. It doesn't relate these items from the left to the right. It relates these items, the total here in actual expenses, to the grand total of all expenses down at the bottom. So what that means is that the instruction category as of October 31st, which is only a couple of months into the academic year, this expenditure was 2% of the total expenses for the institution. Research expenses were 6% of the total expenses for the institution. You might wonder why those are so low. If we scan down here and take a look, this is the big one. 55% of the total expenses as of October 31st were in salaries and fringe benefits. So that is consistent with other organizations where salaries and benefits are the highest single expense across the board. Whether it's 55% or 60% or 48% isn't really important, but it is usually the largest expense item in an operating budget. Just to round it out, we have the same set of headings here on the top, on the right-hand side. And what we can see is that this is a comparison of the current fiscal year, 2020 to 2021, with a prior fiscal year, 2019 to 2020, as of October 31st this year compared to October 31st of the prior year. If we compare some of these numbers, this year in instruction expenses, we've spent $78,000, whereas last year at this time, we had only spent $65,000. Now the percent of the budget used is a different percent because last year's budget was smaller than this year's budget, which we can see down here. The total expenses last year at this time were $3.4 million against a $3.4 million expense level at this time in this year. So what this document lets us do is to see where were we last year at this day compared to where are we this year with this at this day on the same date. And further, it lets us compare our actual expenses with the budgeted amount. So how are we doing against the budget? That's what this shows us. Now, these are all round numbers or rolled up summary numbers. You can see subtotal of instruction, the subtotal of research. I wanted to start with it this way because once we open it up and get into the detail, we can see where are our expenses actually coming from. We're going to look closer at one of these items, but to give you a sense of what's in these things, salaries and fringe benefits, that's faculty salaries, staff salaries, and benefits. Plant operation and maintenance, just to pick a few of these big categories. In this case, the organization has 4 main accounts. One is for an off-site facility, one is for the common areas on campus, and then there are accounts for 2 separate academic buildings. This is the kind of thing that you normally won't be budgeting for in student services or student affairs. So let's look up here at some typical things that you would be involved with. Here's an account for admissions recruiting, student loan defaults. You can see there have been nothing budgeted and nothing hit the expenses in that category. Career services, student services, that's enrolled student services on an ongoing basis. Registrar, financial aid office, and international advising or international student services, that all shared one budget. You can see what the line items are here. Graduation as an event has its own budget. Admissions has another budget here. This is infrastructure. So in this case, these 2 accounts together equal the enrollment management or admissions office budget. So up here at the top, $239,926 plus $94,000 for infrastructure. Infrastructure would represent all of the tools, equipment, all of the materials and supplies that the office needs to continue operating and to meet its mandate. Whereas recruiting expenses, these are the things that will fluctuate wildly from year to year. And notice here we've spent at October 31st, $88,000. The primary recruiting season is heavily active from September through December. So it's no surprise that this is tracking below the budgeted amount at this point in time. And then there are some other student services. So you can get a sense, at least with respect to the size of these numbers, where the priority and focus is in this organization. And you can see that it's in growth and expansion, because the admissions recruiting budget is more than all of the other budgets put together, including the admissions office infrastructure budget. If we look up at academic support, and then we'll look at instruction as well, there are the account numbers and what they represent. We have a faculty center, there's institutional lab support, a budget for an office called corporate partnerships. The people in corporate partnerships are considered, or can be considered, fundraisers, because they actually bring in partnership opportunities that generate revenue for the organization. Certificate planning, new program planning, IT support. Notice that information technology is the biggest one in this area by itself. And then other academic support. This is a mixture of things. And lastly, the instruction or curriculum budget. So this is both an actual set of things. The biology curriculum here has a certain amount to spend, the management curriculum, the math curriculum, etc., etc., etc. If you want to break down your budget or expense amounts by curriculum type, there's no problem with that. But maybe you don't have a very big portfolio where you would need to do it this way. It could be broken down by bachelor's, master's, and PhD, or it could be broken down by education abroad program to location A, to location B, to location C. You can break down the budget in any way you need to. These account numbers are generated by the accounting office, and in many places, if you need to create a new account, you can talk to the accountants and they'll make an account number and set it up for you. Now, it's not true at large institutions where it's difficult to get things to shift, but at smaller institutions, there's a lot more flexibility. So at any rate, this has been a quick tour of this particular financial document. Again, comparing the year-to-date expenses with the budget as of October 31st this year, and the same comparison as of October 31st the prior year.